On January 15, 2026, the USDA dropped a bomb on the American heartland. It wasn't a warning. It was a death certificate for the old way of farming. We lost $7.4 billion in agricultural trade in a single year. Gone. Overnight. This isn't a prediction. It isn't a guess. It is the cold, hard reality of the 2025 fiscal year. For 40 years, American farmers were sold a simple story. They were told that feeding the dragon, feeding China, was the path to safety. It was supposed to be the golden ticket, but that ticket has been torn up. The trade relationship isn't just damaged, it's been severed. We just witnessed a 54% drop in exports. That is the single biggest crash in modern farming history. For decades, if you grew soybeans in Iowa, Illinois, or Minnesota, your entire life depended on one thing. You banked on the fact that China would buy 60% of your harvest. Entire towns were built around this promise. But in 2025, the ships that usually carry mountains of beans across the Pacific Ocean sat empty in the ports. The buyers didn't just buy less, they vanished. They ghosted the American farmer. The orders that were supposed to be on the books never appeared. When demand disappears like that, it sends a shockwave. The futures markets in Chicago crashed instantly. Prices for soybeans plummeted. They fell so low that for many family farms, it is mathematically impossible to break even this year. They are losing money every time they start the tractor. And it's not just beans, it's corn too. Beijing canceled over $1 billion in corn orders. No warning, no explanation, just canceled. The ripple effects of that decision are tearing through rural America right now. Think about how a farm town works. When a farmer can't sell his crop, he stops spending money. He doesn't buy the new truck. He doesn't upgrade his combine. He doesn't invest in more land. Suddenly, the machinery dealership is quiet. The seed salesman has no one to call. This is the start of a deep rural recession. It starts in the fields, but it will reach the suburbs and the cities faster than people realize. The new report also exposes a harsh truth about the political games played in Washington. Remember the Phase 1 trade deal from 2020? We were told it saved the farm. We were told it guaranteed China would buy billions in American goods every year. It was hailed as a massive victory. But the 2026 numbers prove that was a lie. It wasn't a victory. It was a stalling tactic. China never met its targets. Now, they have stopped pretending to try. The political will to enforce that deal is gone. Washington has moved on, and Beijing has found new friends. This leaves the American farmer holding the bag for a geopolitical fight they have no control over. The USDA data makes one thing very clear. China is actively breaking up with the United States. They are diversifying their food supply. They don't look at America as a reliable partner anymore. They see us as an enemy to be avoided. This is a massive shift in mindset. It makes this crisis different from every other trade war we have ever seen. In the past, trade wars were just spats. We would argue over taxes or tariffs, shake hands, and things would go back to normal. Not this time. This time, the Chinese spent years building a plan B, a supply chain that excludes the American farmer completely. They poured billions of dollars into South America. They built deep water ports. They laid down thousands of miles of railway tracks. They built a pipeline for grain that bypasses the United States entirely. That $7.4 billion loss, that is the result of those new ports finally opening for business. It means the market share we lost isn't coming back. Even if the politics get better tomorrow, the infrastructure is already built elsewhere. The damage is structural, it is deep, and it is likely permanent. American farmers are now facing a nightmare scenario where their biggest customer has morphed into their biggest competitor. And right now, millions of tons of grain are sitting in silos across the Midwest with absolutely nowhere to go. Drive down a back road in the Midwest right now, and you will see something disturbing. You will see massive yellow mountains rising out of the fields. That isn't a landscape feature. It is corn. Millions of bushels of corn are piled on the bare ground. The silos are full. The elevators are full. There is simply nowhere else to put it. This is a physical monument to a financial disaster. Every day that corn sits there exposed to the wind and the rain, it rots. And as it rots, the farmer's bank account rots with it. We are seeing a liquidity crisis that is starting to look a lot like the farm collapse of the 1980s. But there is a terrifying difference. In the 80s, we had high interest rates. That was a math problem. Today, we have a customer problem, and you can't fix a customer problem with a government check. Subsidies are just a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. A bailout might keep a family afloat for 12 months, but it cannot force China to buy grain they don't want. And they don't want it. Why? Because they found a better deal. They didn't just stop buying, they switched stores, they went to Brazil. This wasn't an accident. Beijing spent 10 years planning this. They knew they wanted to fire the United States, so they groomed Brazil to take the job. They helped them build the roads. They helped them clear the land. And now it is paying off. It is a zero-sum game. Every dollar lost in Iowa is a dollar gained in Brazil, and the American farmer is fighting with one hand tied behind his back. It comes down to the currency. We hear strong dollar on the news and think that's good. For a farmer, a strong dollar is a curse. It makes American corn expensive on the world market. Brazil's currency is weak. That makes their corn cheap. When you combine cheap land with cheap currency, America cannot compete on price. We lose every time. But the scariest part isn't the corn rotting on the ground. It is what is happening to the dirt underneath it. We are standing on the edge of a massive real estate crash that the mainstream news is completely ignoring. Land values have been going up for a decade. Farmers borrowed against that land to buy bigger tractors and more seed. They leveraged everything. But land value is based on how much money you can make farming it. If you can't sell the crop, the land isn't worth as much. The math is brutal. Without China soaking up the supply, the price floor is gone. Land values are poised for a massive correction, a crash downward. This means farmers who look wealthy on paper are actually underwater. Go to an equipment auction this weekend. Just watch. You will see brand new late model combines and tractors lining the lot. These aren't old junkers. These are $500,000 machines that farmers had to sell because they couldn't make the payments. Main Street is dying. That $7.4 billion that vanished, that was money that used to circulate. It bought haircuts, it bought groceries, it paid for tuition, it paid for the local doctor. Now, that money is gone. It has been transferred out of the U.S. and sent directly to the rural towns of Mato Grosso, Brazil. We let our biggest rival build a competitor that has eaten our lunch. The USDA tries to spin this. They put out reports saying, "Don't worry, we will sell to Mexico, we will sell to Vietnam." It is a lie. You cannot replace a billion-person market with a few smaller countries. The math does not work. You can't fill a bucket with a thimble. We are producing too much food for a world that is breaking into pieces. The era of free trade is dead. Food is now a weapon of war. And in this war, the American farmer is the casualty on the front lines. That $7.4 billion loss isn't just a bad year. It is a warning shot. It tells us that the old rules of the global economy are dead. For 40 years, the strategy for American farming was simple. Plant fence row to fence row. Grow as much as you can. Feed the world. That strategy is now a trap. We are entering a brutal phase of consolidation. This crisis will wipe out the small players. The family farms that have been around for 3 generations, they are the ones at risk. The only ones who will survive are the massive corporate operations with deep pockets. Investors are already circling. They are waiting for family farms to go bust so they can buy the land for pennies on the dollar. This changes the soul of rural America. It turns owners into tenants. And the damage isn't stopping at grains. It is hitting the meat market, too. Look at the data for pork and beef. China used to buy huge amounts of American protein to feed its growing middle class. That stopped. It is a silent embargo. There is no law written down. There is no official ban. But the ships are empty. Beijing has decided to buy its meat from friends, not rivals. So, is there any hope for a recovery? Is there a bottom to this crash? To answer that, you have to look at a strip of asphalt in the middle of the Amazon jungle. For 100 years, the American farmer had a secret weapon, the Mississippi River. It was cheap and easy to float grain down the river to New Orleans. Brazil didn't have that. They had dirt roads that turned into mud pits when it rained. Trucks would get stuck for days. It cost them a fortune to get soybeans to a port. That advantage is gone. While we were arguing about regulations, Brazil was pouring concrete. They finished the BR-163 highway. This is a superhighway that cuts right through the heart of their farm country. It connects the fields directly to the new Northern Arc ports. These ports are state-of-the-art. They are faster than ours. They are newer than ours. And they were built specifically to load massive ships bound for China. China paid for a lot of this. They invested billions to build a supply chain that bypasses the United States completely. They don't need the Mississippi River anymore. They don't need the Panama Canal anymore. This brings us to the most dangerous part of the story, the political alliance. Brazil is part of BRICS. China views BRICS as the future. They want to trade with partners who don't threaten them with sanctions. They want to trade with allies. America is a rival. Brazil is a friend. That political preference creates a glass ceiling for American exports. It doesn't matter if our corn is better. It doesn't matter if our farmers are more efficient. You cannot beat a political blockade with a tractor. Right now, farmers in Iowa and Nebraska are holding on to their corn. They have it stored in bins, waiting for the price to go up. They are hoping for a rally, but the data says that a rally is impossible. Why? Because the world is flooded with grain. Brazil just harvested a record crop. They call it the safrinha, the second corn crop. It hit the market at the exact moment American demand collapsed. This leads to the financial death spiral we are seeing today. It is called the margin squeeze. Here's the simple math of the disaster. The price a farmer gets for his corn has crashed. It is at rock bottom. But the price he pays to grow that corn, that hasn't moved. The seed companies didn't lower their prices. The fertilizer companies didn't lower their prices. Diesel fuel is still expensive. Machinery parts are still expensive due to inflation. So costs are high. Revenue is low. Profit is zero. For many farms, the cost to grow a bushel of corn is now higher than the price they can sell it for. They are losing money on every single seed they plant. And this squeeze is tightening every single day. According to the USDA, net farm income is expected to crash by 25%. That is the biggest drop since the commodity bust of 2016. Think about that for a second. You are working harder, you are producing more, you are taking on more risk, and at the end of the year, your paycheck is cut by a quarter. Where does that missing money come from? It comes from savings. Farmers are burning through the cash they squirreled away during the good years. They are draining their reserves just to keep the lights on. Once that cash is gone, the only option left is debt. You have to go to the bank. You have to take out an operating loan just to put a crop in the ground. But thanks to the Federal Reserve's war on inflation, those loans aren't cheap anymore. Interest rates are high. A 7% interest rate on an operating note eats your profit alive. This is a deadly cocktail. High interest rates, low commodity prices, a strong dollar. Does that sound familiar? It should. It is the exact recipe that caused the farm crisis of the 1980s. Back then, we had an export embargo. Today, we have a silent embargo from China. Back then, we saw foreclosure auctions on the courthouse steps every weekend. We are dangerously close to seeing that again. The strong dollar is the silent killer. It barely gets mentioned on the news, but it is strangling the American farmer. When the dollar is strong, our corn is expensive. When the Brazilian currency is weak, their corn is cheap. If you are a buyer in Egypt or Mexico, who do you buy from? You buy from Brazil. You save 20% instantly just on the currency exchange. It's a no-brainer. This is called currency arbitrage, and it is devastating. The Federal Reserve doesn't care. Their job is to fight inflation in the service sector. They are not going to crash the dollar just to save soybean exports. So the farmer is trapped. He is stuck in a vice. One side is the bank, demanding high interest. The other side is the global market, demanding low prices, squeeze. That $7.4 billion loss, that is just the start. If you add up the interest payments and the input costs, the real damage to the rural economy is closer to $20 billion. That is $20 billion sucked out of small towns. That money should be paying for new schools. It should be fixing roads. It should support local businesses. Instead, it is vanishing into a black hole of debt. You want to see where the crash happens first? Look at the machinery dealerships. Companies like John Deere and Case IH are the canaries in the coal mine. When a farmer stops buying a $200,000 tractor, the factory worker in Iowa stops buying a new car. The economic contagion spreads fast. It moves from the farm gate to the factory floor in months. We are already seeing it in the GDP numbers. States like Nebraska and Kansas are shrinking. Their economies are contracting. Meanwhile, the coastal states are booming. It is a tale of two economies. Wall Street is hitting all-time highs, while the people who actually feed the country are going broke. The disconnect is massive, and it is fueling a lot of anger. Farmers were promised a quick trade war. They were told it would be easy to win. Instead, it turned into a war of attrition, and we are losing. China played the long game. They used strategic patience. They waited us out. While we argued in Washington, they built roads in Brazil. Now, the damage is done. You can't unpave those roads. You can't force China to buy American corn. The structural shift is permanent. So what happens next? Economists have a polite word for it. They call it consolidation. Farmers have a different name for it. They call it losing the family farm. The small operators are the first to fall. If you can't spread your costs over 10,000 acres, you can't compete. You get swallowed up. And once that land is gone, it never comes back. The small farmer is already on the ropes. They cannot survive on these razor-thin margins. And the vultures are circling. Who are the vultures? Real estate investment trusts, foreign buyers, massive corporate entities that have been sitting on piles of cash waiting for this exact moment. They are watching land prices like a hawk, waiting for them to crack. And once they swoop in, they don't sell. That land leaves the community forever. This brings us to the most dangerous part of the crisis, the land market bubble. For 10 years, farmland values defied gravity. They went up and up and up. It didn't matter what the economy did. People believed in scarcity. They believed they weren't making any more land. But here's the problem. Land is valued based on the income it can generate. If you can't sell the corn you grow on it, the land isn't worth $20,000 an acre. The math is broken. If the land market turns, and it is turning, it will wipe out the equity of every farmer in the country. Remember, farmers use their land as collateral. It is their credit card. They borrow against the dirt to buy the seed. If the value of that dirt drops, the bank calls the loan. They force a liquidation overnight. This is the nightmare scenario that keeps rural bankers awake at night. It is the ghost of 1980 coming back to haunt us. Go to an auction this month, you will see it. Farms that would have sparked a bidding war 2 years ago are getting zero bids. Sellers are pulling their listings because they can't get the price they need to pay off their debts. They know the truth. Without the Chinese buyer, the land is just dirt. The repricing of American farmland is the next shoe to drop. It will destroy billions of dollars in paper wealth. Farmers were counting on that land for their retirement. It was their 401k. Now it is vanishing. The illusion of wealth masked the rot in the business model. Now the mask is ripped off. We are left with a structurally unprofitable sector, and don't count on the government to save you. Crop insurance protects you from hail. It protects you from drought. It does not protect you from a trade war. There is no insurance policy for losing your biggest customer to Brazil. Lobbyists in Washington are begging for a bailout. But the national debt is soaring. The budget deficit is exploding. Congress is paralyzed. The appetite for a massive farm rescue bill is zero. Farmers are on their own. This leaves the survivors, the ones with no debt, the ones with massive scale. There will be a few. The landscape of rural America is being redrawn by decisions made in Beijing and Brasilia. We are watching the sovereignty of our food supply erode in real time. We are becoming a residual supplier. We are the backup plan for the world, not the main event. This shift from dominance to dependence is a painful blow to the American ego. We always believed the world needed us. That arrogance was our downfall. The world found a way to eat without us, and they saved money doing it. Now we are left with the surplus, the debt, the empty silos. But this surplus isn't just a pile of grain. It is a pile of unpayable bank loans. And that brings us to the next phase of the disaster, the banking contagion. Community banks across the Midwest are holding the paper on this disaster. These small banks are the lifeblood of rural America. They are heavily exposed. When a farmer defaults on his operating note, the bank takes a direct hit. And unlike Wall Street, these banks don't get a bailout. They get shut down. The Kansas City Federal Reserve just released data showing a sharp tightening of credit. Bankers are scared. They are reluctant to lend money for the 2026 planting season. They are demanding more collateral. They want higher down payments. Most farmers can't afford that. So what happens when the bank says no? What happens when the seed is in the shed, but there is no money for diesel? That is the question we need to answer next. This credit crunch is the final nail in the coffin. It is the end of the road for the family farm. If you can't get credit, you can't buy seed. If you can't buy seed, you can't plant. And if you can't plant, you are finished. This is forcing a wave of liquidations that is picking up speed. It is accelerating. Look at the bankruptcy filings. Chapter 12, bankruptcies have nearly doubled in the first 3 months of 2026. Arkansas is a hotspot. Wisconsin is a hotspot. These are places where farming is life. And life is getting hard. But here's the scary part. Bankruptcy is a lagging indicator. It tells you what happened 2 years ago. It is the rearview mirror. The real-time data is much worse. Thousands of farmers are quietly selling off parcels of land just to stay afloat for one more season. They are cannibalizing their own operations. They are selling the back 40 to pay the interest on the front 40. It is a slow-motion liquidation. It is tragic. It destroys the legacy of multi-generational farms. Land that has been in a family for 100 years is being sold to a hedge fund in New York, or London, or Beijing. This is the hidden cost of the trade war. It changes rural America from a community of owners to a land of tenants. The people working the land won't own the wealth it generates. That wealth will be extracted. It will leave the county. It will leave the state. That $7.4 billion loss catalyzed this transfer. It weakened the American producer to the point where it is vulnerable to a hostile takeover. And here is the ultimate irony. The United States is now running an agricultural trade deficit. For the first time in history, we are importing more food than we are exporting. Think about that. The breadbasket of the world is buying its bread from somewhere else. The USDA projects a trade deficit of nearly $50 billion this year. That is a shocking number. We are buying expensive wine, cheese, and out-of-season fruit from other countries. Meanwhile, we cannot sell our own basic commodities like corn and soy. This imbalance is a symptom of a sickness. Our production costs are too high. The strong dollar kills us. The cost of compliance kills us. We are uncompetitive. Unless these structural issues are fixed, the deficit will widen every single year, and the pain spreads fast. It spills over into the machinery sector. When farmers lose money, they stop buying tractors. Sales of large combines have fallen off a cliff in the last 6 months. Dealership lots are full. Inventory is piling up with no buyers in sight. This forces manufacturers to cut production. We are seeing layoffs at major plants in Illinois, Iowa, and North Dakota. These are high-paying manufacturing jobs. When those jobs disappear, the local tax base crumbles, schools lose funding, police departments lose funding. The spiral widens, from the farm to the factory to the town square. Agriculture is not just about farming. It is about the industrial base, the steel, the rubber, the technology. It is all connected. If the farm economy collapses, the industrial supply chain collapses with it. That is why the $7.4 billion loss matters to every single American. It is not just a rural problem, it is a national security problem. A nation that cannot feed itself or sell its food is vulnerable. We are ceding our sovereignty to nations that do not share our values. We are outsourcing our food production. We are relying on imported food. That leaves us exposed to supply chain shocks. Remember the pandemic? Remember empty shelves? Imagine that scenario applied to basic food in a future conflict. It is dangerous. Yet that is exactly what our current trade policies are encouraging. And the most baffling part? Washington is silent. There are no emergency hearings. There is no panic in the halls of Congress. The people in charge seem to be asleep at the wheel while the engine is on fire. Why? Is it incompetence? Or is it something else? Is there a reason they are letting the family farm die? We need to look at the political incentives to understand why help isn't coming. Where are the rescue boats? Washington isn't sending them. No massive trade delegations are flying around the globe to find new buyers for American corn. There is no emergency session in Congress. The response from the political class has been a collective shrug. They are focused on other things. They seem content to let the free market sort it out. But in this case, sorting it out means mass bankruptcy for American families. This attitude is dangerous. It is lazy, and it is a stark contrast to what our rivals are doing. Look at Brazil, look at Russia, look at China. They don't treat agriculture like a hobby. They treat it like a strategic asset. They treat food like a weapon. They build the roads. They sign the deals. They protect their own. Meanwhile, the United States is resting on its laurels. We are arrogant. We assume we are too big to fail. But the data from 2026 proves we are failing, and we are failing fast. The world is moving on without us. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, is building a fortress. They are creating a closed loop of food and energy trade. They buy from each other, they sell to each other, and they leave the United States on the outside looking in. This is the biggest shift in power since the Cold War, and right now, agriculture is the tip of the spear. Here is the scary truth that nobody in Washington wants to say out loud. By losing the Chinese market, we lost our leverage. For 20 years, military strategists said the same thing. They said, China will never attack us. They need us too much. They need our food to prevent starvation. It was a form of insurance. That insurance policy just expired. China has secured its food supply from Brazil. They don't need us anymore. That leverage is gone. They are now free to challenge us in Taiwan. They are free to push into the South China Sea. They can do it without fear of famine. That $7.4 billion loss wasn't just a hit to the wallet. It was a strategic defeat. It weakens our national defense. It emboldens our enemies. So, how do we stop the bleeding? We need a total rethink. We need to stop acting like a colony that just exports raw resources. Why are we shipping raw soybeans across the ocean? We should be processing them here. We should be turning them into renewable fuels. We should be turning them into plastics. We need to build value-added industries right here in the Midwest. Keep the jobs here, keep the wealth here. We need to diversify. We need to find new partners so we are never held hostage by one country again. And we need to fix our own house. We need to invest in our infrastructure so our farmers can actually compete. But most of all, we need to decide if we care. The family farm is not just a business. It is a reservoir of culture. It is a set of values. It is the backbone of the country. If we lose the family farm, we lose a piece of the American soul that we can never buy back. The dashboard is flashing red. The bankers see it. The farmers feel it. We are standing on a cliff. One path leads to a future where America is still a superpower. The other path leads to irrelevance. It leads to a future where we are a former giant that lost its way. That $7.4 billion is gone. It is not coming back. The question is, what will we do to stop the next $7 billion from leaving too? Will we fight for our farmers, or will we let them become casualties of globalism? We cannot eat stock prices. We cannot live on imported food forever. We need to wake up. We need to hold our leaders accountable for this failure, and we need to stand with the men and women who work the land. They are breaking under the weight of this crisis. We have covered the trade collapse. We have covered the Brazilian competition. We have covered the banking contagion. The story is complex, but the conclusion is simple. We are in trouble, and we need to act now. If you want to understand what happens next, you need to see the prediction for the housing market in rural America. It is ugly. The farm collapse is a tragedy, but it is just the detonator. The bomb is the housing market. When a farm fails, the damage doesn't stop at the fence line. It travels to the bank, and then it travels to your front door. We are seeing early signals of a rural housing crash that will make 2008 look like a warm-up. When land values plummet, the collateral for millions of mortgages evaporates. The banks are sitting on paper losses that they are hiding from the public. But they can't hide them forever. If you own a home in these affected states, you are in the blast zone. You need to know which banks are exposed. You need to know if your community is on the list of ghost towns projected by the Federal Reserve. We just released a deep dive into this specific housing crisis. We show you the map of where the foreclosures will hit hardest. It connects the dots between the empty silos and the for sale signs that are about to flood your street. Do not wait for the letter from the bank. Click the video on your screen right now to see the future of the American housing market. I'll see you there.